Flight attendants and pilots, what NSFW things occur during your jobs? My wife and I bought last minute tickets to a family event and could not get seats next to each other. Once we boarded, I convinced the guy sitting next to my wife to switch seats with me. Nice guy takes my assigned seat, which was next to a woman who was apparently suffering from the flu. 5 minutes after takeoff, she projectile vomits, but tried to use a pillow to cover her mouth, which just made the vomit spray out sideways all over the poor guy. He just sits there for a moment, frozen, and then slowly turns back to look at me with his face that said, "You did this to me and I will forever hate you for it." I offered to buy him a drink but he ignored me. It was a 6-hour flight. Obligatory not me but a friend of mine disclaimer. I have a female friend who flies transatlantic as a flight attendant. She told me a story of how one of the passengers had been in the bathroom for at least 15 minutes. Being a busy flight, people were pissed off and complained to her that he had been in there for a long time. She went to the door, knocked a couple of times with no response. Obviously being concerned for this passenger's safety, the doors were opened. Inside was a guy on toilet, trousers around ankles, headphones in his phone with porn playing and flaccid D in hand. Bro fell asleep while whacking it in an airplane toilet. Embarrassment ensued. Not me but a friend who's a flight attendant who came across this really stubborn male passenger who wanted a sanitary pad that he saw the flight attendant hand over to a female passenger. Convinced that it was an eye mask thingy you put on before sleeping. Arguing with her about it, she finally gave in and gave the sanitary pad to the guy who coolly removed the anti-adhesive and stuck it on his eyes and went to sleep. Survey pilot here. Sometimes when I'm flying back and forth for 5 hours straight I need to piss in a bottle. One of my co-workers had his D slip out of the bottle while he was going full bore, and he pissed all over the instrument panel. You should have heard his desperation on the radio. A couple weeks later, for our bi-monthly rotation, a new guy took his plane, and we didn't tell him that Greg pissed all over it like a moron. Ducking Greg. This happened to another pilot at our company. We fly small planes with no doors between the cockpit and the cabin. We usually put our jackets behind our seats. A passenger sitting in the front seats could easily grab them without us noticing. The end of one flight, he noticed that the passenger on the left front seat was sitting on his jacket. Very odd, but whatever. The passengers deplaned and he went to pick up his jacket. That's when it hit him. The passenger had taken it on the seat, grabbed the pilot's jacket and put it over it and sat back down on it. It was only a 20-minute flight. How badly do you have to go? Thanks Reddit. My highest comment is now about hitting on a plane. As a flight engineer in the AF flying out of an island in the Pacific, a sailor had fallen overboard and drowned. The Navy recovered his body a few days later. Since this is downrange, only a body bag is available, not a transport casket. Before takeoff the loadmaster comes to the cockpit screaming, yelling and babbling. He says the body in the bag is wiggling. Turns out eels have entered his body via his mouth and are wiggling within his body and causing the movement. Just a plain passenger. But this happened on my last flight. About halfway through, the pilot comes over the intercom and says please come out of the bathroom. Smoking in an airplane is illegal. Naturally, this gets the whole plane on edge. Turns out, it was an old woman who was completely naked and vaping in the bathroom while refusing to come out. They eventually had to break into the bathroom and take her out, which then caused the woman to try and fight the flight attendants. She was arrested as soon as we landed. I am a test pilot for a small startup. Landed a few weeks ago at a small airport in the middle of nowhere to empty my piss bottle, fill up my water bottle. My right seat wanted to check out the heli that was there. Long Ranger. I went to use the bathroom and he comes running to me. Turns out the 2 medics for the local medevac service were in the heli making bam bam. We got to watch them both run naked from heli to their training station. On the way out over the radio we got asked to never discuss what we saw. Father was a commercial pilot. He has lots of stories. His most WTF NSFW story was probably having to deal with a lactating woman breastfeeding her cat in coach. My girlfriend at the time and I once had sex in an airplane bathroom. It was actually quite easy to get in and out undetected, but in retrospect I think we were lucky with the timing. The thing they don't mention is how hard it is to actually have a sex in there. Those rooms are tiny. Not a flight attendant, but the guy behind me got detained once we landed because he was playing with himself next to two girls in their 20s. Not a flight attendant or a pilot, but I was once on a flight where I saw one of the flight attendants giving a blowjob to one of the pilots. Now, the thing to keep in mind was this was before 9/11, when the cockpit wasn't kept so securely locked. There was a bit of a bug spreading around the plane, which I was asked to take care of since I was the only doctor on board. I made my way to the cockpit to inform the pilot of the condition of the passengers, and as soon as I opened the door, I see the flight attendant bent over with her head in the pilot's lap. I could not believe what I was seeing, but I managed to snag a quick photo of it. I'm a pilot and spent a lot of time scouring NTSB reports for various reasons. One time, I ran across an interesting one. The NTSB's probable cause was the pilot in command's improper in-flight decision to divert our attention to other activities not related to the conduct of the flight. Contributing to the accident was the exceeding of the design limits of the airplane, leading to a wing failure. The rest of the report indicated the occupants were partially clothed and the front right seat was in the full aft reclining position. Unfortunately, they did not survive the crash. But I always found the NTSB's wording of the report more entertaining than I probably should given the circumstances. They word things very professionally, and I'm sure someone had to come up with a way of saying they were having sex and crashed without actually saying it. Report is here. Not totally on topic, but I fly a lot for work, and one time I walked to the bathroom as a flight attendant was walking out. She saw me heading in right after her and said, "Be careful. There's a bomb in the bathroom." I think it was a nervous reference to her having just blown up the toilet, and she quickly realized what she said as I gave her a perplexed look walking into the bathroom. She pulled me aside as I walked out and apologized profusely, probably knowing she'd have lost her job if someone less understanding had heard it. I would imagine lots of tray tables being left up and seats not being in the full upright position. Used to fly a small commuter plane, 19 passengers. No door behind the cockpit. Also no flight attendant. It's really loud, so communicating is difficult. And signals only kind of thing. Just took off on a 30-minute flight and a passenger taps my shoulder, which startles the hell out of me because I can't see him approach me and I'm hand flying. Turns out he just needs to take a leak. Okay, no big deal. Except we don't have a bathroom on the plane. We do have these gel packs to use though. So I hand him one and go back to flying the airplane. No autopilot. The flight is full and I'm not sure where I expected him to go. Back to his seat maybe? No. Instead I look over to the other pilot, and only inches away from our face is this dude's long wrinkly and hairy bush that probably hasn't been kept to in decades. As the guy is pissing into the gel pack, we hit some rough air and urine is going everywhere at this point. On the avionics, both of our uniforms, and my bag. If that wasn't enough, the whole plane saw it. Once he's done, he hands me the gel pack, like I'm supposed to do something with it. Oh no buddy. I hand him some napkins and point to go back to his seat. Some low-cost airlines have been making the toilets so small that when people are done with a no, too, whilst reaching round at a funny angle to get the toilet paper behind them, they smear it from their ass on the wall. Poor fars have to clean this. Military pilot. We get shot at. Kind of NSFW. Not an attendant or a pilot, but one time on a flight to Hawaii, my mom was sitting behind me and next to this guy who's setting off weird vibes. I couldn't tell at the time because I'm generally clueless and enamored with his beautiful show cat he had under the seat. My mom was next to the window, sleeping, when she felt a lot of action going on next to her. Looks at her seatmate and he's furiously jerking off under a thin blanket that shows everything. Stares right at her like the scene from We Need to Talk About Kevin. My mom clams up and didn't tell me or the flight attendant what was happening, which was kinda stupid in hindsight. I was awake watching a movie in front of her, never knowing that was going on. Pilot here. That stuff mostly happens when we get to the hotel wherever we're overnighting. I fyak now what I mean, wink wink nudge nudge. Another guy I shared a crash pad with in LGA said he used to bang a far in one of the bunks when he went over the Atlantic. We both agreed it was awesome, but very dumb. Fireable offense. There's lots of stories like that, but they are all kind of boring after a while. On a flight to Cancun, Everyone was drinking, getting their vacation on early. Somehow, a passenger let loose the most silent, most deadly fart ever. It was the kind of smell that caused complete strangers to become friends in a shared moment of horrid existence. Lots of gagging. The stench awoke my sleeping GF. The stewardess, en route to a call button further up the section, stopped, gagged and turned back around, fleeing to safety. Flight attendant here. Pilots are hooking up with flight attendants constantly. I've walked in on 2 different guys in the bathroom. Lock it. People. A couple weeks ago I had a lady use the lavabo and didn't even shut the door. I see camel humps daily, the male equivalent of a camel toe. I've cock-blocked people trying to get into the Mile High Club. There's also plenty of rumors of pilots and flight attendants hooking up mid-flight. But I myself have never experienced this. When one pilot has to go to the bathroom, a flight attendant will go up in the flight deck. Oh, and last year I had a guy who was drunk on drugs and groped a female passenger. Guy got arrested obviously, and I had to give a statement. I once had sex with Eartha Kitt in an airplane bathroom. I was a flight attendant in the Marine Corps. Inside joke. Helicopter crew chief. Mechanic who flew in the back of a helicopter and served as the aircraft commander's extension of authority in the cabin of the plane. Also loaded cargo, calculated weight and balance, operate crew, served weapons, and generally just worked as an additional set of eyes and ears, especially for things the pilots can't see. For example, looking straight down. Anyways, I worked on V-22s, and for cross-country flights we would go up over 10,000 feet. We had a bunch of auxiliary fuel tanks in the cabin, so you could squeeze by then if you needed, but can't really see back there. The guy in the back said to me on Ike's internal comms system, "Hey, I'm going off Ike's. If you don't hear from me in 2 minutes, come back and put my oxygen mask on." He came on Ike's a short time later, and I asked on a private channel what was going on, so the pilots wouldn't hear, and he took off his oxygen mask at 25,000 feet so he could jerk off while hypoxic, along the lines of autoerotic asphyxiation. My mom has been a flight attendant for Air Canada for 43 years. I've heard lots of stories, but one always stuck with me. Back in the 80s when China was just opening up, my mom would get a lot of older folks from rural China on her flights from Beijing or Hong Kong. Apparently many of these people had never used a modern flush toilet before. On more than one occasion they would simply close the lid, position themselves on top of the toilet, and promptly defecate on top of the toilet seat before leaving. Also, many of these folks would apparently just suck up huge gobs of phlegm and spit them right in the middle of the aisle. Luckily, things have gotten better in the intervening years. I used to work as a baggage guy, loading and unloading planes. On our planes, we had to put the passengers' pets in a small area in the front belly compartment. We had an inbound flight that had quite a few pets on board. When I opened the compartment door, I was hit with the most gut-wrenching dog smell. Once I was able to see through my watery eyes, I saw one large dog kennel pressed up against a small kennel. The idiots that loaded the plane put both the kennel's front gate ends together. The larger dog must have pressed its ass up against and it through the gate because the little dog was covered in it and in the corner quivering and whimpering. Trying to explain and apologize to the little dog's owner was one of the hardest and funniest things I've ever had to do. I was on a flight to China. One of the passengers up in business class decided to take advantage of the unlimited drinks he was offered before takeoff. He got plastered. When the plane started to take off, he decided to take a sleeping pill to tide him over for the 14-hour flight we were about to endure. Well, shortly after takeoff, the guy decided he needed to use the bathroom. He ventures back to where the stalls are, but shoots past them. He walks about 3 rows ahead of my row, whips out his member and pisses all over the row and the people in it. They had to move the passengers, rip out the seats, and monitor the guy for the rest of the flight. Whatever happened to him, I have no idea. I'm just glad he didn't hold it in for 3 more rows. Not pilot or flight attendant, and actually happened during SAS screening. After a weekend of EDC in Vegas, everyone is lined up to go home. Strike up conversation with the girl in front of us and she mentions how she had a surplus of party favors left over from said festival. She said she didn't know what to do with them and decided to take them before getting on the plane. Tsar takes one look at her eyes and tells her to lift up her shirt or something like that. Didn't quite get the gist of it. And she lifts up her entire shirt with bra, flashing the Tsar agent. She was promptly escorted into secondary. 5 minutes before the plane was due to take off, she ambles on the plane and finds a seat. My flight director found a bag that was moving in the overhead bin. It turns out, it was a young girl in a bag, out of Port-au-Prince. Hearty. It was a sick slave-hating girl being sent to Canada. Edit. The security and the police were called. She was heavily drugged. No one knows who put her up there. I hope she is okay now. Everyone is telling once in a lifetime type stories. But the most common NSFW thing that happens on airplanes is dudes falling asleep and getting noticeable boners. Edit. I have a new appreciation for top commenters lol. Thank you for all of your boner stories. Not a pilot of FAR, but I fly between 100 and 150 flights a year. One time I was flying out of a small Midwest airport to Dallas. I roll up to the airport restaurant bar to get a bite and a drink before takeoff. I notice this lady sitting by herself at the bar. A gentleman approaches her. They seem to be hitting it off, flirting, laughing, etc. Time comes to board the plane. And since this was on Southwest Airlines, it was pick your own seat. Naturally they sit next to each other. I am a few rows behind them. Flirting leads to touching, and then kissing. You can see that hands are wandering everywhere. By this point, I am not the only casual observer. About 3 or 4 other guys are looking and laughing. We all bond over their public display. It escalates to a point where she gets up to go to the bathroom. About 30-40 seconds later he follows. Apparently they thought that was enough time to be inconspicuous. As he approaches the bathroom she is already in. A flight attendant stands in front of him and says no. Back to your seat. She knocks on the door and tells the lady to get back to her seat. All the observers are laughing at this point. The flight continues and she is practically mounted on him, doing everything they could possibly do while keeping clothes on. This continues until we land and all deplane. She quickly hurries off the plane. He is a few steps behind her, but she seems to be in a hurry. The other observers and I are talking about it and laughing as we exit the secure area into the baggage claim area. Then we see her, still several steps ahead of the guy, and she runs into the arms of her boyfriend and starts kissing him. Her flight guy just stops dead in his tracks, takes a couple seconds to observe, and then just leaves. I haven't laughed so hard in public with people I had never met prior to or since. I was a flight attendant for 6 years. Summer flights to party islands like Ibiza, Mallorca and Mykonos could get quite raunchy, like women boarding in fishnets, wanking and blowjobs at the back of the aircraft. Edit. By fishnets I don't mean just tights. I mean full body fishnets. No bra in the skimpiest thong you can imagine. One time I had thesex on the plane. I'm a co-pilot for a company that charters private jets. We had a customer who boarded with his boss and several beautiful women in revealing clothing. And in the air we could hear a party going on in the back. Loud music, men laughing and cheering, girls giggling. After a while the door opens and someone taps me on the shoulder. I look and a completely naked woman casually asks me how much longer we have before landing. I tell her we have a couple more hours to go, and she returns to the back.